number 4. Have we got it? We got me? We got me. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I run a global community of innovators, over 7,000 people. Some of them are even policymakers, you wouldn't believe it. And I'm particularly happy because a lot of our innovators are from Portugal, and actually some of the most successful ones. So not only did some of our methodology get ported over into START, and it's been very much teamwork between us and Luis Miguel and all the people who have been really active in this area, but also there have been some results that we have been showing to the politicians. So I was very honored and privileged to be awarded Women Innovator of the Year by our wonderful commissioner, Carlos Moedas, and a wonderful, wonderful representative of Portugal. This here was actually a moment, I mean, I must say, we're very, very honored to have him as a big fan of what our community do. And in this particular instance, we were invited to literally invade the parliament and the discussion between high-level officials and politicians and VIPs and Nobel laureates about the future of European research and innovation. And those hands you see there is Francisco Marques Teixeira, who's from Porto. And he's a neuroscientist. And he was fitting here, he's one of our community. I'll tell you a bit more about him, but he's here fitting Carlos Moedas with neurofeedback sensors. And we were visualizing and sonifying his brain activity in front of the audience of VIPs at question time. So you try and do that with a politician who is not as clever or as brave as Carlos Moedas. I mean, I wouldn't like to speculate what might happen if you got some of our American colleagues onto the stage and visualize what's happening in their brain at that moment. So let me see if we're working. Which way am I pointing? Tell me. It's working. So another politician who had spotted us when our community grew to over 5,000 people. I realized that we needed a role model, and I wanted it to be a woman, because of course we didn't have enough women in technology, and there was always a struggle to get enough women to participate in prototyping events. Of course, things have changed, and I'm very pleased to be part of this movement to change things, and I will tell you what our results are now. But at that time, I really needed a woman to represent us, and it needed to be a courageous woman, someone who's not afraid to challenge preconceptions. This is Victoria Modesta, and we were very, very pleased that when, in the last month of presidency, Obama was asked to curate or guest edit the version of Wired US, he was asked to put together the future technology frontiers, and we were one of them, with Victoria representative. So that was a bit of a seminal moment. I mean, this happened without us knowing. I'm going back. I'm going forth. Forth? Good. I figured out the technology. So this is Victoria. She's a fellow of MIT now. She's closed the Paralympics in London, opened the Paralympics in Rio. Really, really quite a seminal sort of figure in the accessibility space. And when we put her at the center of our labs, the first thing we said was, okay, we're not talking about making someone, so to speak, normal. We don't recognize this word. We are looking at how do we make people extraordinary and people we can aspire to. And in Victoria's case, it was a case of, okay, how many bodily extensions do you want? You can have as many as you want. Anouk Wipprecht, a wonderful designer, and Luis Miguel will know very well, she designed a prosthetic leg that could create smoke for the stage, activated by sensors. So here's Victoria in our labs, fitted with sensors, with a carbon fiber dress, and with a prosthetic leg that allowed her to express herself through her leg in this way. And this is creative experimentation, but it's really important because it leads us to further research, which allows us to then think of other ways in which we can allow people to express themselves. So in this case, the neurofeedback team, which is from Portugal, fitted her with neurofeedback sensors which allowed her to control the lights on her dress by expressing herself directly from her brain. And she trained for a few days in our labs, By the end of it, she was able to do it without any problems. She was able to use it as another means for expression. So we took this further with the neurofeedback team when we went to the... and this is another thing I want to highlight. Look at the amount of women in the lab. Because it has creativity at the core, these are some students at MIT. So Joy Ito sent some female students from MIT. And then there's a community from across Europe of different women who came together. The lab was full of men and women, but this is just an interesting photograph to show you how many women engage with technology. So we took it further. We went to Slush. Slush is the biggest convention of startups and investors in Europe, 20,000 people, and they said, what would you like to do? And we said, we will do labs. We bring scientists and artists together on stage after a week of prototyping and inventing new things, and we will create a performance, not a 3-minute pitch, not a classic startup pitch, because the kinds of things we are doing are affecting human beings at a level that needs to be experienced. So at the center was Rika Hanninen, a blind singer, very proud to be a blind singer. She is a vocal coach from the Sibelius Institute. And Rika was at first, I mean, I will let her kind of, you may be able to hear her voice in the background if you have a little bit of audio. She's here singing from the songs from the Kalevala, which is traditional Finnish stories. She can do all kinds of things. And we said first to her, what do you need when you perform? What do you not have at the moment? And she said, well, actually, I don't know how the audience feels because I can't see them. So the first implementation was a creative implementation of super simple technology, but that is life-changing. So this is also worth remembering, that sometimes it's not about complicated things. Sometimes it's about taking something that is available now and that you can do in very effective ways. And that is, we fitted the audience with pulse sensors. And we connected those to Rika, and Rika was able to feel the pulse of the audience as she was singing. So she was able to now create a dialogue with the audience. It's very simple to do this, very cheap to do this. But then our neurofeedback team decided, okay, how do we take that experience of communicating directly from your brain further? They took a system from clinical trials that you use for people with anxiety. So here in Porto, they treat people who have anxiety attacks by visualizing their brain activity. Because usually your brain pattern will change before you understand that you are anxious. And if you see that it's starting to change, you can start to train to control it. Instead, this time, they took the same system and made it into a musical instrument. So you could start to train to play music directly from your brain. And people in the lab were training for about 2 hours to be able to go up and down the musical scale. And then Rika put the neurofeedback sensor on, and she was able to play music instantly, without training. And Chico, the neuroscientist, said, I have never seen this before. What has just happened? And I said, well, it must be a paper in there somewhere. You need to kind of look at what are these parameters that are enabling her to be so talented. But this is someone who in the mechanical era was considered less able-bodied. And now, in the era of brain-computer interfaces, turns out she's much more talented than the rest of us. So these are the moments that we find are incredibly important for us and that drive our activities, where we combine art and science. We put neuroscientists and data scientists and accessibility designers and you name it, everyone on stage together, and everybody has to figure out how does this affect us as human beings. This is Rika's brain activity being visualized here for the benefit of the audience. So where does all this come from? I have around 26 probably years of work in innovation. I worked with Apple, Nike, Nokia, designed the original system for flicking images when everybody in Portugal was on 56K modems in 2003. And my co-founder went on the design of the first iPhone to Apple and has stayed there ever since, so he's here in the Apple patenting ecosystem. I got headhunted by the European Commission because some of the big data things that I was working with were very, very meaningful to them, and particularly because I was working on the user end, on how the user experiences the data, and they really wanted more of that. So that's, in short, the sort of background. But this led to something called Music Tech Fest, because they got me to direct the roadmap that came out of the music tech, which was a great area of research with big data. The music industry was the first one that had problems with sustainability because they were migrating to digital and there were no business models attached. And it was a very interesting case study. At the same time, the academics were doing fantastic new discoveries of how you manage that data, what you can do with it. And I said, I need to connect academia and industry and artists and scientists in the same space. Everybody said this is impossible. They don't speak the same language. They don't want to talk to each other. And I said, okay, let's give it a go. Anyway, in cut long story short, the whole thing exploded. I went and saw BBC, EMI, Spotify, all those guys. And then all the big tech giants joined up, Microsoft Research, Cisco, you name it, and then lots of other industry. Besides, this is us at the London Symphony Orchestra with the Brainwave Quartet in 2014. And immediately we were asked to go on tour. So this is us in New Zealand, combining new tech and old tech. This is us doing experiments with geek punk, we called it. We hacked into instruments on a London Symphony Orchestra stage with Lou Edmonds from Public Image Limited. Any of you who have been following in the old days the seminal kind of bands like Sex Pistols and Public Image Limited and all those kind of bands, that's some of the representatives of those. So we would kind of literally be experimenting with culture and with technology live. And then, of course, some of the stuff we were featuring started to get recognition. So it was honorable mention by Prix Ars Electronica, by one of the things that we featured at the Centre Pompidou in Paris. And then another one, which is she has now been in residency with Ars Electronica, Robertina, and this is a tank full of jellyfish. And what she does is jellyfish communicate via chemical reaction. She converts the data extracted from their communication, sonifies it, and then plays back to it. So it creates a dialogue with a biochemical system, live system. So it crosses over into all kinds of areas of investigation. And of course, no barriers. So we very, very quickly realized not only were we being, the community was growing with all kinds of researchers and backgrounds and all kinds of expertise, not just creative, all kinds of scientists and all kinds of industry people. But this was, for instance, another seminal moment in Berlin when there was a collaboration between an artist from Israel and an artist from Palestine. And this is a classic feature of what happens. And then, of course, I was sent by the European Commission to negotiate a deal between the European industry in Internet of Things and the Câmara Brasileira de IoT, and a minister called Maximiliano Martinhão. And he told me about this wonderful thing that they had done in Brazil with making sure all remote areas had mobile phones. And then we started chatting about how Internet of Things can help with better management of food production in Brazil and then better management of health. And then realized that, hey, if you were to ship a microboard to all the kids, like to a kid in all the different areas of Brazil, run little workshops to teach them how to use it, they could teach their friends. And then you have, in a few years' time, a generation of engineers. This is the sort of thing that you can do because, of course, all kids love music. So we are usually teaching them electronics like this. They really enjoy it. I think that we might have a little video. So they totally get into it because it's music, because they can relate to it. And what they've built in 3 hours is actually a piece of engineering. And then their parents come to us and say, they want to do engineering now. How did you do this? You know, it's like this. So it's really, really important. And this is why, you know, Aveiro, Steam City is so important. This is our latest DJ from Sweden. I want to just tell you about the Stockholm thing we did last year, because we put deliberately women in charge of all technology areas. So our statistics were that with STEAM we can, or with STARTS, but focusing on creativity at the core, we were getting high numbers of women participating. And we thought we wanted to get those figures higher. And we wanted to go over 50%, at 50% or thereabouts. Put women in charge, so people like Imogen Heap in charge of blockchain labs for a week, Robin, the pop singer from Sweden, in charge of girls in tech, Anouk Whiprecht, who I mentioned earlier, Anita Kragic, who's a world-renowned professor of AI and robotics, Kelly Snook, NASA scientist, who's also author of the Mimu gloves, Nancy Bain from Boston, from Microsoft Research, LJ Rich from BBC Click, the technology BBC program, and Ginger Lee, she does data visualization from Florida. These are just some of them. So as soon as we did that, and we also did Eva Kaili as woman in charge of politics, because we also wanted that sector represented. We wanted women to go into politics and actually make a change. We got 53% female participation in a multi-gender technology event of 800 plus people. That's a lot. And it wasn't a women in tech, because women in tech, that means, you know, you're putting women over here. And we are really keen that everybody is part of this. So this is Imogen Heap sending her voice to the moon. I think Luis Miguel knows Martín Nicole Rogina, the artist who's involved here. She's been working also on some European projects. Via a Dwingeloo telescope in Holland with astronomers who run it, they were turning audio into light wave, and then in 2.3 seconds it would bounce quite literally off the surface of the moon, come back into your ear, distorted slightly. And 88 people sat there and sent this voice. It's not a major scientific breakthrough, but it's about moonshots. And it's a feeling that after that, people are so creative and they create incredible things because they're so inspired. It's a very important thing to do as part of it. So this is how diverse the community is, just some of the faces who were part of our labs last year. So 800 plus people, but 90 people in high-level labs. These are high-level professionals, mature professionals, postgraduates, etc. 88 first names that were different. Now, usually, you have everybody called Francisco here, I'm sure. You know, and now we had people who were 88, there were 88 different first names, from New Zealand to Alaska, that kind of thing. And it's wonderful because the mix is just great. I'm going to let you just get a feel for it.
We are now 25 meters underground in Sweden's first nuclear reactor, now also known as the Cathedral of Science.
Many brains. I feel like brains walking around.
I'm totally amazed by this place, honestly. It's my first music tech fair.
The most important thing are the conversations that happen, the cross-pollination of different skill sets.
I can speak easily, communicate easily in this kind of environment.
So the interesting thing about MTF is that every year there's a theme, and we try to use that theme to help our development of that year.
We chose this AI lab because AI is something that is inevitable.
The first step is that AI is actually a companion, right, for humans and accompanying human existence.
There's a whole bunch of different projects happening, but what I see is a number of different specialists interacting, trying to speak to each other.
People here are like creating own stuff and creating new stuff. I was like, that it would be really cool to like see what they do.
What I think can be interesting is the challenge, what human can already do. If it can expand our boundaries of perception, if it can challenge us to be even more creative. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of it.
So that's the sort of feel you get when you enter this space. And this is kind of what triggered it, because after 2 years of running this all over the world, we were in Boston, inside Nerd Labs, inside MIT, and all of these Ivy League luminaries from Ivy League colleges decided, after they witnessed what happened in our labs, that we needed a manifesto. And this was the manifesto. I didn't instigate this. This happened. Other people instigated this. And I really had to pay attention, because this is a big statement, especially in 2014, when nobody's thinking kind of cross-disciplinary. So first thing I did was I proposed a program that would allow this to be sustainable. So for instance, look, we've jumped forward. Okay, it's now jumped 5 slides. Let's go one forward from here. Is it working now? Okay, brilliant. So this program had quite a strong structure where I was literally responding to what our crowd needed. There were so many amazing projects, and we needed to somehow close some gaps. There were some problems that I saw that people needed help with. So we tried to close those gaps, some microfunding, some tech toolkits that they needed, some really new kind of tech that would enable them to have new ideas and stuff like that. Cut long story short, the time from 0 to hero, if you like, was reduced really considerably. So from, for instance, first idea to a prototype to a patent initiated. Bearing in mind that the first idea was in creative, but the patent was in primary industry. So suddenly we had these results that were showing that the sort of interventions we are doing with this wonderful ecosystem were giving us these kinds of results. That's Francisco. They got €1 million follow-up funding from the project that we supported. This person also has something to do with Portugal. He was an innovator under 35 by MIT as a result of being supported. That's right, Vahaken. And as you can see, 30 under 30 entrepreneurs in Forbes, Israel, and Swedish patent for primary industry. This by an Iranian immigrant at the time when all the borders were closed. So really interesting results, very socially important results. Vahaken's company, Human Instruments, we supported, enabled a severely disabled jazz musician who had been a trumpeter before his bad accident to once again, and this is his words were in the British Council documentary, it's the first time I don't feel disabled anymore, because for the first time with the technology that we developed, or that Vahaken led, he was able to express himself fully with a musical expression. And this was in Stubal, in the festival, was featured there, it was on your national television at the time. This is a further work with Tim Palm, who calls himself DJ Arthro. He has a very serious disability that is related to arthritis. And he has last year won the grand prize. This team with Vahaken and another wonderful person, Tim Palm, who is from an organization in Britain called Drake Music that helps people who have problem with playing instruments. They find all kinds of ways in which they can enable them to play instruments. So they created this wonderful project that won the grand prize by Kotaho Innovation, one of the best incubators in Europe, certainly the best one academically. And the product came out literally in August. The final product in September at the Reeperbahn Festival. They got the equivalent of the Oscar for the sound awards. They're called Isabels at Reeperbahn. 2 of our projects, 1 Isabels and 2 were nominated, and we were incredibly proud of them. So this is this wonderful team who have won an award just a few weeks ago. So this is also something that was promoted, that he was also helped by Portugal. And you can see here Luis Años and Horacio Marquez and Francisco Teixeira winning another prize. This was a very much a multinational team, some from America, some from Eastern Europe, from all over the place. And they created a simulator with NASA data that showed frequencies of rotation between the planets. And then later we were asked by, we were very honored to be asked by Peter Weibel from ZKM, Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, to be in residency there with some of these projects and take them further. So what they did was they hooked neurofeedback to the simulator, and you were able to change the frequency between the planets with your brain. And this is, because we always involve audience in this, there's no kind of much of a link between performance and audience. And a 3-year-old girl was insisting she wanted to do it. And it was beautiful because the child's mind is so pure that her level of focus was super high. No adult could match her. It was wonderful to watch this kind of thing. So I will just let you see a tiny, tiny bit of this, if it will play. I think this is, maybe I need to click again. This is Chico actually moving getting the frequencies to work with his brain, and every single brain had a different signature. It was completely different in the way it was manifesting itself. So this is the amount of industry that comes to us. So primarily, of course, creative industries, but I had to recently analyze this for DG Grow, and this is the Directorate General for Jobs and Growth, and I realized that we have space, automotive, primary industry, we have electronics, of course, we have lighting, you name it. All kinds of industries that came to us and wanted to work with us because this was a wonderful environment for them to participate. This is us in residency in one of the biggest unicorns currently in Europe. They're being floated on the New York Stock Exchange. They do all of the data for communications cloud service for Uber, WhatsApp, Xiaomi, all of those guys. And this is the result of this. So we said, okay, if all industry want to be on board of it, we need to have a foundation that takes care of this. So we have some amazing luminaries on this. They're involved with various governments and with the European Commission and with the Parliament. We had to have permissions from different governments to get these people on board. And we are developing systems that particularly, for instance, track intellectual property inside ecosystems, because of course, if we all know where our intellectual property is inside of there, then of course we can all openly collaborate. So to wrap it up, it's actually about the human capital at the end of the day. These are our guys, these are our guys who are able to do moonshots. We try and enable them, but this is really where it's at. And we always say we don't predict the future, we invent it. Thank you.